As we near the end of my 2021 movie review journey, we've got 6 titles that came out in October that somehow I did not get to during the year. Some big names: The French Dispatch from Wes Anderson, Last Night in Soho from Edgar Wright, The Last Duel from Ridley Scott, and also only my third A+ of the year. Let's talk movies. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It, and welcome to my wrap up for October 2021 movies. We are nearing the end here of the journey, and pretty soon we will have my best and worst of the year. Taking a look now at 6 movies that came out in October that I just, for whatever reason, did not get to. Some of them did not play at my theater. Actually, none of them played at my theater. We only have 4 little screens, so we don't get all of the movies that come out. And then a few sort of hidden gems. There's a Netflix movie that is a prequel to another 2021 movie. So yeah, a lot to talk about here. And before we launch in here, I do want to welcome you to Dan Reviews It. Thank you for finding this video. We've got all of the movies I've reviewed throughout 2021, both in standalone reviews and in these month-by-month wrap-ups. You can see them all on the channel, and there's a playlist as well that just says 2021 movie reviews. So you can just go down the list and find something that tickles your fancy here. But we're going to talk about Mass, The Last Duel, The French Dispatch, Antlers, Army of Thieves, and Last Night in Soho. We're just going to knock these out in the order in which they were released in October. That seems like the fairest way to do this. So let's start actually with Mass. This actually got a little bit of awards buzz because one of the actresses, Ann Dowd, received a Best Actress nomination for supporting role at the BAFTAs. So no Academy Awards love, but certainly Sundance and BAFTA and some of the other awards programs did shine a little bit of light on this film called Mass. It's M-A-S-S. And the essential premise is it's really a 4-person movie. There's a few other people at the front and the end. But most of this movie, I would say all but maybe 5 or 6 minutes of it is these 4 actors sitting around a table discussing a very, very serious event. And we've got Reed Birney, Jason Isaacs, Ann Dowd, and Martha Plimpton. I'm not familiar really with Reed Birney, but the other people I know. But essentially, I don't want to go into too much detail about the movie because I think this is one of these movies where it will work better, perhaps, if you don't know sort of what they're discussing. So they come together at this church, and we get the sense that something horrible has happened, but we don't quite know what. For a good, half hour of the movie, we can sort of speculate, but they don't really drop the ball, or drop the bomb, I should say, immediately. They sort of, give you little breadcrumbs that maybe lead you to it, but they finally, about a half hour, 35 minutes in, say, okay, this is, what happened. They mention it. But it's a conversation movie, which I typically really like. It's mostly in real time, which I typically like. So doing a lot of things here that I really, really enjoy in films. And this is a movie that, like a lot of movies, I didn't know anything about it going in. I saw that it had a high Rotten Tomatoes, so I thought, okay, well, critically, people are enjoying this. I saw that Ann Dowd got a BAFTA nomination. Okay, cool. So this is obviously a higher profile film maybe than some of the other ones that I could have watched, as I went through my October movies. And I was so blown away by this movie. When I think of movies like this, you got, your 12 Angry Men, and more recently there's this great movie called Carnage with Jodie Foster and Christoph Waltz and Kate Winslet, where same thing, it's almost all in real time, and they're basically just sitting around talking about this incident, and emotions are flaring high. And to my knowledge, this is not based on a stage play, but it very well could have been from one. But to my knowledge, it's not. Fran Kranz is doing his directorial debut here. And when you have something like this where there's a lot of people around the table and whatever, and not a whole ton of movement really, it does take, I think, a skilled director to sort of keep us invested, keep us interested. And of course, the script helps that immensely too. But if we're just, on a static shot, like you would be, I guess, in a stage play, it's not as exciting. So here we're getting sort of up close and personal with some of the people and their emotions, and we can see on their faces what they're talking about. There's a lot of crying here, and everyone does a fantastic job. And I'll be honest, if I saw this movie before the Oscars, I might have had a different answer on some of my snubs for things like Best Supporting Actress, because Ann Dowd, I think, certainly deserves to be in the mix, and so does Martha Plimpton. I think this is one of these cases where they all entered the BAFTAs as supporting. Nobody went in as lead. So, you could have given it maybe to her as well. So, look, without saying too much about the specific plot of this movie, it is excellent. It is heart-wrenching. It is, it's really, really something to be seen. You do have to be in the right frame of mind because it's heavy subject matter. But even, there's a couple of even like light laughs in the mix, as well. But yeah, all around, this is amazing. It is an A+ for me. It's only my third of the year. West Side Story gets an A+, and the documentary Summer of Soul that won Best Documentary at the Oscars, that got an A+ for me. This is only my third of the entire year. And there's only 6 more movies to review after this episode, because there's going to be a November-December sort of combined review. And I've already watched all those movies, and none of them are A+. I'll tell you that right now. So that's it. Just 3 A+ for the whole year. So you're definitely going to be hearing more about this movie when we do the best and worst of 2021. So, all right. Well, as we continue here, since these movies are several months old, we're not going to dwell too long on them. I wanted to hit Mass a little bit since people probably haven't heard of it, and it was so wonderful. But yeah, these next ones will really probably only be about 3 or 4 minutes. We'll sort of give you the Cliff's Notes version of it. So Last Duel is going to be next. This is by Ridley Scott. It's an action drama historical film, and it really was a dud at the box office. It did not do well at all. It was made for about $100 million. It only made $30 million, and I think that might be worldwide. I'm not even sure if that's U.S. only. Look, you can see why. Ridley Scott went on a tirade that all millennials don't want to go to the movies or whatever. Millennials sort of shunned this movie. Yeah, they sure did, because it didn't sound like anything that was interesting to anybody under the age of like 50, to be completely honest, unless you're a huge Ridley Scott fan. And I like a lot of the people in this movie. It includes Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Adam Driver, Jodie Comer. I mean, I like all of those people. But it just is not necessarily something that I think I would have ever been drawn to were I not trying to review all these movies. So I could see why it wasn't such a hit. But it was directed by Ridley Scott, of course. But the screenplay was from Nicole Holofcener, who I really love her movie. She did that Enough Said movie with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and James Gandolfini years ago. And this is based on a book of some historical proportion called The Last Duel, a true story of trial and combat in medieval France. And this basically is, yes, set in medieval France. Damon stars as Jean de Carogue or something, a knight who challenges his former head squire, played by Adam Driver, to a judicial duel after his wife accuses the Adam Driver character of raping her. And then Ben Affleck plays a supporting role as Count Pierre something or other, and he was nominated for a Razzie for this movie as worst supporting actor, I should say. All right, so look, the quick Cliff's Notes version of this movie's review is that it's way too long. We take 3. I will admit that the framing device is interesting because we see the same story 3 different times from 3 different perspectives. We see one from the Matt Damon, one from the Adam Driver, one from the Jodie Comer. The inherent problem with that is it lends itself to a lot of repetition. Yes, and we've had sitcoms and stuff and even drama shows that have done something similar, but, over the course of a hour-long show, you only get, 6 minutes. They do the highlight reel, and then they move on to the next person's perspective. Here, it's like 40 minutes, and then 40 minutes again, and then another 40 minutes. Maybe not that one. Maybe it's 35, 35, 35, and then we get finally to the duel, which is like 15 minutes at the end. But it's a lot of repetition that, frankly, is, I can't say it's not interesting necessarily, but if you know anything about this movie, you may know that it is known in circles and by critics for this really brutal rape scene, and realistic one, And we not only have to go through it once, but then we go through it again from the other perspective. And it's like, dude, we already saw it and it was horrible the first time. So that was kind of the only thing I really knew about the movie going into it, because I read some news articles about, like, oh, do we need to see this visceral rape? And maybe you do and maybe you don't. I don't know. I could go back and forth on that issue, but you certainly don't need to see it twice. I get that you're doing it from different perspectives, but ouch. Ridley Scott, I think, is one of the most, he's one of these directors that is so inconsistent. He's one of the most inconsistent out there. He has these great movies like The Martian, and then he does something horrible like The Counselor. This lies somewhere in the middle, but for all of its negatives that I've talked about, it's great to look at. The final duel is exciting when they finally get to it. The performances by the three leads are really solid. Ben Affleck, I can kind of take or leave. I don't think his Razzie nomination was warranted necessarily. But I think his character was sort of more for the comic relief element of the movie, which it sorely needed, because, the other stuff is so hard to watch, really. So we needed a little bit of a lighter note sometimes, and Ben Affleck's character does give us that. But overall, I didn't connect with this movie the way that I think I was supposed to. So I leave The Last Duel with a B-. All right, up next is The French Dispatch. This is from Wes Anderson, and he's one that I don't find inconsistent. In fact, I would say he's probably the most consistent director around in terms of a style and look for his films. I would say most of his movies you could literally just take any shot from and know immediately it's Wes Anderson by the design, by the color scheme, a lot of this stuff, which is a little interesting because a lot of this movie is in black and white. So there is not a huge color scheme here, but we do see a lot of the Anderson regulars, including Tilda Swinton, Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, Frances McDormand, who else? Adrian Brody is in this. I can't remember if he's a huge regular of Anderson movies or not. Benicio del Toro. Jason Schwartzman, of course, is in this, as he's in all of them. Ed Norton. So, a lot of the regulars here. And this is a little bit like The Last Duel, actually, in the sense that this is taken in three different parts. Last Duel, we see the same thing over and over again. But this is really more of three sort of separate stories that all sort of link into this newspaper, the French Dispatch of Liberty, Kansas, which is celebrating its final issue in this film. So the editor of the magazine basically dies of a heart attack, and so publication of the magazine is immediately suspended following this one last issue. And so we have 4 articles here that are in here with an obituary among them. So everybody is not necessarily interacting with everybody else. A lot of people are just doing sort of the standalone scenes in black and white, most of them. And here's the thing. I normally like Wes Anderson. I do. I would say his peak for me is Moonrise Kingdom. And I think, he's been on a little bit of a downward trend because Isle of Dogs was not that good. I mean, it was okay. I think I gave it like a B maybe or B-. But for Wes Anderson, that's not actually that good. Grand Budapest is like an A. Moonrise Kingdom is an A+. Fantastic Mr. Fox, I think, was like an A or an A-. So usually he's in that sort of A range. And Isle of Dogs, down from that. This, I think, goes even further down from that. I hate to say it, but I really did not connect with this movie hardly at all. I mean, some of the stories told within, were interesting enough, and some of them had my attention, but it's one of these instances, where you're only sort of as strong as your weakest story here. And when you're looking at, again, just like Last Duel, 35 minutes or whatever on each story, if one of them isn't really that appealing, it just drags for that whole time. And I would say none of them were really like awful, but piece by piece, I don't think any of them is higher than probably like a B or a B-. And that's like sort of the best of them. So yeah, it's really, really a mixed bag. It's, I would say, probably the most Anderson-y movie that's out there, even more than some of the other ones, because it's sort of more free form. He was able to inject all of his Anderson-iness in it. And, I can take or leave that. Usually I like that he's sort of, look, you can give him this. He's got his own style, and a lot of directors can't say that. Tarantino has his own style. Wes Anderson has his own style. Other people, maybe not so much. And I think that comes with pros and cons. And for this particular movie, I think it was a con. This did not work for me. It's pretty to look at least in the color scenes. The black and white, because of Anderson's style and needing that sort of eye-popping color that was absent, it didn't connect with me like a lot of his other movies did. So yeah, disappointing for sure. I leave The French Dispatch with a C. Antlers is up next, and this is a horror movie. This I actually watched in theaters back in October. Like I said, my theater did not have it, but one of our sister theaters did, so I watched it one of the days I worked there. And so it's something I have not reviewed now for months. It's been in my head, but I do like this movie, and I remember enough about it for sure to be able to talk, because Mr. Guillermo del Toro is one of the producers, and of course he always has very visual. Now there's somebody else. There's another director with a pretty distinct style. He did not direct this, but his producing lent itself to being a bit more, I think, visceral than your typical horror movie. I know I've said that a couple times now this episode, but yeah, a lot of these movies are that way, like, really, really eye-popping and eye-catching, and very specific in their tone. So yeah, this is with my girl Carrie Russell. She plays the mom here. Jesse Plemons is in this as well. We love him. And newcomer Jeremy T. Thomas, who plays the boy, who is I would say middle school. I'm not sure if they ever give an exact age, but essentially they are in this Oregon town, and she is a teacher. Carrie Russell's character is, and her and her brother, played by Jesse Plemons, become embroiled in one of her students' lives, whose dark secrets lead to some terrifying encounters with ancestors. And, this has actually been a really good year for horror. We've had a few that have been horrible that I've given Fs to, that you'll hear more about in the best and worst of 2021. But just last month in my wrap-up, we did Candyman, which was pretty well received, and I feel like there was another one last month too. Yeah, the one with Rebecca Hall, The Night House, which was really good as well. And then earlier in the year, you had The Quiet Place. So yeah, this has been a really solid year for horror. This is another one to the mix. There maybe were a few too many jump scares for my liking. If you know me, that's not my favorite. I think it's kind of lazy, but not too many. And in between all of that, we had a lot of really sort of eye-popping imagery, spooky stuff. The child actors really good. And Carrie Russell, she's in another underrated, in my mind, horror movie from a few years ago called Dark Skies. And she was great in that. I think, she could do a lot of different things. I'm currently watching her in The Americans, and that's obviously more drama related, but we've seen her do some comedy as well. And I think she works here because she really does sort of give her all to every role, and you believe that she is, spooked by this. She, turns out to be a great kind of scream queen here. So yeah, this was a pretty good movie. I think it's not necessarily maybe nothing that we've seen before. I think there's some themes here that kind of go hand in hand with a lot of like small town horror type movies, but I think they did a good job with what they had here. Really eye-popping to look at. I leave Antlers with a B. Next, we go to Army of Thieves, and this is a Netflix original, and it is a prequel to Army of the Dead, which also came out in 2021. It's odd to get a movie and its direct prequel in the same year, but Netflix does their own thing, so whatever, they don't care, right? But this is based on a story co-written by Zack Snyder, because Zack Snyder directed and had a heavy influence then in that first Army of the Dead movie. But other than sort of producing and like sort of co-writing the story, or he didn't even write the screenplay, but he sort of had a hand, I guess, in the story development. He doesn't really have much to do with this. It was directed by the lead of the movie, played by Matthias Schweighöfer, who was in Army of the Dead. This is basically like his character's kind of backstory as Sebastian. He's a bank teller, and this is basically a heist movie. Yes, the zombie outbreak has occurred. that we knew from the other movie, and that is sort of dominating the news cycle. But the movie that we're watching, these guys go through, has almost nothing to do with the zombie stuff. Yeah, there's a little bit of that in there, but in this story, they're sort of still on kind of the outskirts of that. It hasn't exploded like it had in the Zack Snyder movie. So essentially, he produces these YouTube videos about safe cracking and, oh, here's what I can do. So he gets called into this sort of secret competition and blows everybody away, with his skills. And then they hire him to do some heist work, and we find out sort of what's going on from there, and okay, who are these people, and whatever. And we saw him sort of doing some heist stuff. I mean, Army of the Dead was about heists. This is even more, I think, about it, because that was a little more about also the family storyline, which I didn't really care for, and some other things. I thought that movie was actually quite middling, Army of the Dead. The fact that they lifted out an entire actor and put in Tig Notaro and refilmed all of his scenes with her, and they didn't change any dialogue and all of that stuff, that actually put my grade an inch higher than it would have been normally based on the movie itself, because I think that's really cool. Here, though, you just have a pretty neat safe cracking movie. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel here, but everybody does a good job. I think Matthias has a pretty interesting eye for directing these action movies, and it's not an easy feat when you're not a pro director to direct yourself, especially in a movie with so many moving pieces. So I give him credit for that. But like Army of the Dead, this is a little too long. It's not quite as long as that one, but it does go about 2 hours and 10 minutes. So, we can cool our jets a little bit there and cut out 20 minutes of this movie. But it was enjoyable enough to watch. So I leave it with, I think, the same grade. I would have to look, but I think it's the same grade I gave Army of the Dead, which is a B-. All right, and finally, we end with Last Night in Soho. This is a psychological horror directed by Edgar Wright and co-written by him as well. It stars Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy, among some others that you might know, like Matt Smith and Terrence Stamp. Diana Rigg, by the way, who played in the original Avengers TV show in the 60s, is here as well, and this turns out to be her last movie. She died in 2020. But essentially, a lot of this movie takes place in that era, in London in the swinging 60s. So I thought it was a really nice touch to sort of add Diana Rigg as one of the characters here in this. But essentially, this gal Eloise Turner, who is played by, like I said, Thomasin McKenzie, she is going to college, but she becomes kind of an outcast, and she dreams of sort of following in her dead mother's footsteps, becoming a fashion designer. Her mom killed herself while Ellie was a little girl, and so as a result, she's being raised by her maternal grandmother, but she goes off and tries to find her, venture her own way, and here she falls into... It's hard to talk about this movie without giving too much away, but let's just say she ends up at night during her sleep seeing the 1960s in a whole different way, and then it goes sort of from there. We meet the Anya Taylor-Joy character, etc., etc. This is a movie that I think lends itself to really going in and not knowing too much about it. I didn't, and I think it helped a lot. I think I would have liked it anyway. I like Edgar Wright's style, typically, and that's on display here as well. But, like I mentioned earlier with Antlers, this is a great year for horror movies, and this one is up there with some of the best I've seen this year. I mean, everything about it pretty much works. I mean, I will say, some of the stuff can be forgiven, that it doesn't all fully make sense in terms of like real world schematics, but look, it's a horror movie. You suspend your disbelief, I think, for some of that stuff, right? And so as you dive more into this world and sort of figure out, okay, what the hell's even happening, you really do sort of get sucked in. And by the end, I'm not positive that I was completely satisfied with the ending. I will admit that. But I liked the journey getting there. And I didn't hate the ending. I don't know. I don't know what I wanted really, but I'm not sure that it left me satisfied enough, but this is a great horror movie. Everyone is giving their all here. Anya Taylor-Joy, she can do it all. We've seen this, and I think comedy was sort of the last question mark for her, and then she hosted SNL last year and was great at that too. So yeah, she really, I think, is going to be a huge star, and she's getting her name in some very interesting projects early on, which is cool. So we've gone on long enough for this video, so I'll wrap it there. Last Night in Soho gets an A- from me. It really is a really great horror movie. Good year for horror, 2021. I don't think I have any coming up in the November, December lineup, but yeah, so far I've had quite a few B pluses and A- this year for horror, so always a good thing. This almost got an A from me. It really did. I mean, there's not too much wrong with it, really, and not a ton of jump scares. Love that in a horror movie. So all right, I will wrap it there. Like I said, November, December will be the last video for the 2021 wrap up, and then we will do the official best and worst of the year in that video. So next 2 weeks or so, we will finally put 2021 in the books. I know it's been a while, but the Oscars just happened a couple of weeks ago, so I sort of use that as the cutoff to watch these movies. So now I've seen all of them, and we'll get the review. So thanks for watching. We'll see everybody next time. Bye.